Well, hi everybody. Right now you're in section 1, or session 1 of the Principles of Teacher Transformation, and we're going to be going over in this session the change process. And I think you would all agree that change is not easy. If you've ever tried to go on a diet, quit smoking, break bad habits, get up earlier, exercise more, you know that making the change is very difficult to do. And we're going to look at some of this, some of the things associated with change in this presentation. And when we think of change, I want us to understand what it actually is. Basically, it's altering or transforming or transitioning from one place to another. We're at point A, we want to get to point B. If we wanted to change our location, we would go from point A to point B. We wanted to change parking places, if we wanted to change our place in line, whatever the case may be, okay, when we change, we go from one spot, and in our case, it may be a bad habit or it may be something that is not good for us, to another spot. I think what happens, though, is we don't have the patience with ourselves. And that's something that we have to be aware of. Change is difficult. And it's really a step of faith. It can happen so incrementally that we don't see it. If your goal was to lose 50 pounds and the first month or two, the first week you lost a pound, and you lost a pound every week, you might not see the 50 pounds until the end of the year. You wouldn't see the 50 pounds until the end of the year. Nonetheless, the journey that you were on in order to lose that weight, sometimes, is this actually working? What's going on? I watched my diet today, nothing happened, but then when you reach a point, you say, you know what, this stuff really does work. My diet works. That bowl of oatmeal or those few eggs in the morning as opposed to a donut, does work. I will lose weight. It helps to convert our words into actions. And as the process occurs, it can improve our attitude. We begin to feel better about ourselves as we make these adjustments. And as we make the adjustments and we see the change, it's almost the compilation. We're compiling little incremental changes, and they're becoming large ones. And when we see those large ones start to take hold, we start to develop more confidence. That confidence allows us to take risk. It allows us to be able to try something new again. It opens up our mind to all kinds of different situations, and it certainly changes the way we see ourselves in the world that we live. We interact better with people. Our attitudes are better. Slowly, as the change began to take hold, and as we started to see it. Through the journey, though, it can be painful. It can be somewhat painful. Physical change may be easier than a change in trying to change our attitudes or our emotions or our mind. If we're trying to change our attitude about another person, it's probably easier to be with them physically because you don't have to talk to them. You don't have to say anything. but you can stand next to them if you have to. But emotionally, we have trouble with them. They may have wronged us, we may have had a problem with them, whatever the case may be. So physically we can stand being with them, emotionally we have trouble. Now, there's a word here that I want us to be aware of, and that's imprint. Imprint is nothing more than the logic that we developed over the years as a child. It's the rubber stamp on, yes, this is the way it works. And the way things work may be wrong. It's kind of like you rattle the dog food container and the dog comes running, because the dog realizes that rattling means he's going to get fed. Oftentimes, as kids, we can draw some false conclusions, and kids do it all the time, like ways to get attention, and so on. And by the way, attention is a commodity today. Everybody wants it, not everybody gets it. And those that get it, they almost appear in the eyes of others like they're rich. That's another story. But what our imprint is, what our conclusions are, right or wrong, they can keep us from changing. And if you're told you're no good, you'll never make it, you've got trouble, that imprint starts to build, and before you know it, it'll keep you from changing. We have to be forgiving of life as we go through the process, and we have to adopt a more positive outlook. Stop worrying. Life can be a challenge at times. And sometimes we can look at life as just being tough. Just being tough. Other people look at it and think life is just an opportunity. And the past will always be the past. And what we have to realize is that it would be nice if we could forget the past. And lots of times we try to, but unless we get amnesia, it's going to be hard. But the past won't forget us. And that's where we have to begin to really explore ways that we can stop those negative thoughts from coming into our mind that keep us from doing some of the more productive things in life. I said it before, I'll say it now. Change isn't going to happen overnight. And you certainly can't keep pulling up the flowers to see how things are going. And you have to realize that if you have a habit, it's going to die hard. If, in fact, you're on a diet and you make a slip and you eat something bad, or maybe you go a few days and you eat something bad, the best thing you can do is get back on track after you fail. Don't give up. There are people that have quit smoking 39 times, but they eventually quit for good. And I think of all of those spaces in between those 39 times that they tried to quit. They may have gone 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 10 weeks. They may have gone for a year, 2 years. They weren't smoking, though. They may have started again, but in between they weren't smoking. They weren't involved with the bad habit. So understand, if you fail, get back on track right away. And you'll discover that as you keep doing that, the change will become easier and easier as you move forward. You got to want to do this. You have to want to do it. When you will yourself and realize that you have to be faithful, you're making a choice, you're setting a goal. If in fact it's not something that you shared with somebody, you're going to be the only one that knows. You have to be accountable to your own conscience. I said I was going to do this, and I'm going to do it. Take personal responsibility. I realize sometimes we can be our toughest critic, the bottom line is that's okay. Take the time. Be willing. And that word there, uncomfortable, sometimes we have to be uncomfortable when we're trying to make a change. Get away from negative people when you're in the change process. Sometimes you got to change your friends. You got to develop positive thinking. You have to do some thought substitution. You have to take the emotion out of situations. Deal with facts, not emotion. Keep you from becoming more argumentative, and it certainly will give you the ability to disagree with the right attitude. Find ways to fill your head, your mind, with information that edifies you. And whatever it takes, think positively and get away from negative people. Okay? Change requires positive thinking, and it requires the right people. You want to be great? You have to make changes in order to be great. With every great breakthrough, there's a break with. And it's not enough to say I'm going to make some changes on the job. Changes need to be wholesale. You have to make them in all areas of your life, because life is one indivisible whole. And as we go through this, guess what? We're going to inspire others. And I said it before, we will become risk takers. If we can make changes and we can begin to really look at life as an opportunity, the changes that we make will be the prerequisite for us, and it will precede us becoming great. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can work to change a small portion of events. And in the total of all those acts will be written the history of this generation. That's Robert Kennedy. You want to be able to change your own history. You want to begin to develop your own legacy in life. Then you will end up having the permanent help that you want, the permanent change, and you too will become great, okay? And you'll feel the overwhelming success that comes with making change. You have to be consistent. You have to be flexible. If you're consistent, flexibility goes along with it. And flexibility helps us to avoid becoming discouraged. You know, it's like, I'm going to get up at 5 o'clock every morning. Well, you get up at 5:30 this morning. That's okay. Be flexible. And you have to do this with others. When you're consistent, you have your own value system. Everyone doesn't have your value system. But you have to be able to inspire people, make sure that you're consistent, you're going to make mistakes, and you have to have the patience with others, knowing full well that they may not think or do the same things that you do. It allows us to evaluate our motives. Change is for us and us alone. We don't change to please others, to keep other people happy. We change for our own benefit. We change and do things that help us improve. It's not for somebody else. If you're changing for somebody else, don't change, because you will resent the change. But if you're changing for yourself and trying to make sure that you become a better person, that's the change that you want. It strengthens our character. We all know that character is what you do when no one's looking. Don't become someone that you're not. And don't compromise your value system. There's one thing in here, number 3, pay attention to what you're doing when you're under stress. Because believe it or not, when you're under stress, that's who you really are. And other people will see this. Character is what you do when no one's looking. And when you're under stress, that's what your character is truly like. Now, within your lecture notes, you have a little activity, and it's a fun activity. I want you to read the life lessons, and I want you to watch the movie clips below, and they're outlined in your lecture notes. It's The Field of Dreams, almost a review. And there's 2 sections in here that I want you to pay attention to. Number 1, Doc, who was Burt Lancaster, saves, and by the way, if you haven't seen this movie, I'd encourage you to watch it, saves Ray Kinsella's daughter, Karen. Now, Doc was also played by a young man whose name escapes me right now, whose name was Archie Graham. Doc Graham was the person who was having his dream come true on Ray's Field of Dreams in Iowa, until Karen fell out of the stands and was knocked unconscious. And Doc, as Archie Graham, had to make that decision whether or not to come across the baseball field and save Karen, knowing full well that when he did it, he was going to change back into the old Doc Graham, the old man. The trick here is I want you to understand that Ray's brother-in-law, Mark, never saw the field. He never realized what was going on the field until Doc saved Ray's daughter, Karen. There was a part in the movie where there had to be pain. And when Mark was placed in a situation where there was some pain with his daughter, with his niece and so on, that's when he changed, because he didn't even see the baseball players on the field, but the minute that he had the problem, he said, where did these baseball players come from? Now, the second piece is Ray meets his father. Ray left home in rebellion. The problem is, he wanted to make things right with his dad, but his father died long before he could. And in this movie, Ray had to be prepared to meet his dad, which he did at the end. And you have all of this in your lecture notes. I'd like you to take a look at that and answer a few questions that go along with it. And you'll understand why change is so important. And you'll understand some of the lessons that we learn along the way. And sometimes if we don't change, what can happen? This is a great section for you to really learn from and to really start to draw, and start to create a foundation for you moving forward in terms of change, your purpose in life, and what you can do as you move forward. So I'm going to leave you guys now. You take a look at that, and we'll be back at you with session 2, which will be on the principle of design. Okay, everybody, take care.